Hey, welcome. So I wanted to do a follow-up video to the review I did last year of the Joker Nomad 5-inch knife. I recall at the time I had reviewed it at the same time as the Avispa, and I had remarked at the end of my initial impressions that not only was the knife excellent in terms of fit and finish, but it just seemed like a knife that I expected to use most of the time. My thought when I first was checking it out was 5 inches is probably the perfect all-around blade size for just a general camp knife. And in some ways I still think that's true, but in probably what has almost been a year of owning it and then adding to my collection with other knives of different shapes and sizes, I've been surprised how my opinion on that has changed a little bit. And since I like to talk tools with you guys, I just thought I would talk through that to see if any of you have felt the same on your own knife journey. After getting the Nomad, I was able to get my hands on the Joker Campero, which is just a little over 4 inches long, and man do I like this knife. I haven't yet done a full review video on it, but I probably should. And I just have felt like, you can tell by looking at them, the Campero is a bit thinner of a blade stock, and when it comes to food prep, which I really prefer in a general camp knife, that it's able to do that pretty well. I have used this to prepare dinner for my family in the kitchen quite a few times, cutting vegetables, cutting meat. It does a pretty good job of that, and I've used it as my table knife in place of, say, a steak knife or whatever else. I've used this with my dinner, and I think it does a really good job at that. Better than this does for sure. The convex edge is very sharp, but it's just so thick at the top that it doesn't slice through food and things as well. And more importantly, you might say, well, who cares about food prep? It's an outdoors knife. Sure, but compared to some of the larger knives that I've used, I find, yes, you can chop if you want to chop, and it does a decent job at that. It's long enough to baton through smaller pieces of wood, and it does a good job of that. The convex edge really can take abuse, and it splits pretty well. And it also does finer tasks pretty well also. It is a pretty good all-around knife. But this F&Grow 143, when I've taken it out to do chopping and splitting, just does such a better job because of its almost 2-inch larger blade, that I find my taste in these fixed blades evolving over time, where almost a year later I think to myself, rather than having one knife that is the Goldilocks that's kind of in between, I noticed that they now have a 6.5-inch version of the Nomad. I haven't tried it yet, but I suspect that would actually suit what I'm after a lot more now, because I would rather use a smaller knife like the Campero. 4 inches is really nice for carving, for stick shaving, for all kinds of general camp tasks, and the fact that it is so good for food prep and things as well. And obviously you're not going to do much batoning with a 4-inch blade, but on small pieces of wood where that made sense, I did test this. It does baton. The 14C28N withstands that kind of abuse pretty well also. I would be more inclined to bring this or a really small belt knife like the Kaiser Hair. And I feel like having a small general knife with a much larger heavy-duty knife probably, for me now, makes a lot more sense than a knife like this. Nothing against this in a way. I mean, it's still a very nice knife. It's made of great materials. I like the steel on it. Convex is surprisingly easy to sharpen. The sheath that it comes with is excellent. The fit and finish is excellent. There's a lot of really nice things about this knife. It's just, for my tastes, what initially seemed like, oh, it's the best of all worlds, actually becomes the opposite, where you're like, it's too big for some fine carving tasks, it's too big for food prep, ideally, and it's not quite big enough for like real big, heavy chopping. The steel will take it, but an even bigger knife just does a better job at that kind of stuff, that I actually have found in the last 8 months or so the opposite of what I expected, that it's actually not the knife that I reach for most often. Most of the time, if I get this knife out to use it, it's more, I see it sitting somewhere and I'm like, yeah, I really ought to take that Nomad out and use it, and I just use it for just nostalgia because I like the knife, but not because I think it's ideal for some of those tasks. And that seemed worth reflecting on. And I like to report that kind of stuff with you guys rather than just do a review of a tool and then never come back to it. I like to do longer term, what are my impressions still, you know, of this tool after maybe 6 months or a year or more of playing with it. And like I said, I just think that the Campero, for me, is the perfect general knife. Very much if I were asking myself, if you were going to go camping or go backpacking or something, which would be knives that you would bring without overloading yourself with too many? I feel like this is a strong choice. I would definitely bring it, especially since this small of a knife carries really nice, and it's really light, and review coming on this for a standalone. The grip on it is really nice, but the severity of how it goes from thin to fat on what is not a super long blade actually is sometimes kind of unideal for food prep and certain cutting tasks. Now for small, just working carving, this is excellent, but it's less of an all-around knife as this, and this still carves really well. That 4-inch really is like a sweet spot, I think, in knives in a way that I thought the 5-inch was going to be, and it's not. Now, if I get a chance to check out the 6.5-inch version of the Nomad, I would love to do that, because given what I've now experienced, I just feel like that would meaningfully distinguish itself in a collection of different size knives a lot better, because 6.5 inches is now into that. It's a really good chopper. It's really good at batoning and heavy survival tasks, and it's better enough than a 4-inch version that it now justifies itself clearly. If this was the only fixed blade I had that was an outdoor knife, I'd probably use it and love it and not think too much about it. But like many things I discover, when you have alternatives, you find yourself no longer reaching for it as often, and as much as you tell yourself I like something and I plan to use it, if you just notice that you never do, that's worth commenting about. Just figured I'd go over that. Let me know in the comments if you guys have had a similar kind of feeling as you've collected knives, or if you disagree. And if you think a 5-inch blade like the Nomad or one similar is awesome, tell me your stories about what you've used it for and why you think that is actually an awesome size in a knife. I would love to just hear what other enthusiasts think. Otherwise, guys, I appreciate you bearing with me to the end here. I talk about gear, gadgets, tools, electronics a lot on this channel. So if you're into that kind of thing, please subscribe and stick with me. And otherwise, I look forward to your comments, and I'll see you in the next video.